Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. If you haven't already done so, please make sure the volume of this podcast is set perfectly to your listening enjoyment. Please take your seat, whether that's on the treadmill, car, sofa, or bed, and buckle in for the last trip. My name is Jamie Beebe, and I'll be your tour guide, recreating someone's last days in paradise. On behalf of myself and everyone behind the scenes, please enjoy the Last Trip podcast. And because nobody likes a long flight to get to where they want to be, let's prepare for takeoff. It was spring break on Florida's Gulf Coast. Sun, surf, and 22 college students crammed into a rental house along Panama City Beach. Among them was 21-year-old Reny Jose, a brilliant mechanical engineering student from Rice University with a flawless GPA and a bright future ahead of him. But on the night of March 3rd, 2014, Reny stepped out into the warm evening air and was never seen again. By the next morning, his friends reported him missing. Most of his belongings were left neatly in his room. His phone and some clothing turned up in a nearby trash bin, and more clothing was scattered by the beach. 16 of the students who traveled with him quickly packed up and left town. What really happened in those missing hours? Did Reny wander into the waves? Was he the victim of foul play? Or is there a darker truth hidden in the silence of his friends? This is the story of a young man who vanished during spring break in one of America's most infamous party towns, and the questions that have haunted his family and investigators for more than a decade. Panama City Beach in the spring of 2014 was a place of stark contrast. A sun-bleached paradise and a roaring arena for young revelers chasing one last fling before adulthood. Picture miles of sugar-white sand spilling into emerald Gulf waters. Sand so pure it looks sculpted from quartz crystals, washed down from the Appalachia over centuries. The effect glitters under the sun, inviting barefoot wanderers to step into perfection. PCB wasn't just about its beaches. It was the self-crowned spring break capital of the world, the place where college students gathered in the tens of thousands each March. From 2010 to 2016, roughly 300,000 students flocked here for the weeks of parties, nightlife, and reckless freedom. It was a destination that balanced party and paradise. By day, visitors lounged on the endless coastline or explored the Gulf's hidden world, snorkeling over reefs, diving into shipwrecks from eras past, or watching bottlenose dolphins glide through the surf. PCB was, after all, the wreck capital of the South, where historic vessels like the Gray Ghost lay beneath the waves waiting for explorers, and hundreds of artificial reefs teemed with life. Beyond the shore, attractions like Miracle Strip Amusement Park had reopened in April 2014, blending nostalgic rides with newer thrills. For families, it was a slice of childhood in motion. Gulf World Marine Park hosted dolphin shows and up-close encounters, while Goofy Golf let you putt around dinosaur statues with emerald waves as your backdrop. Deep within the everyday magic of the area beat tales that added intrigue. Legends of ghostly princesses roaming Shell Island, banshee voices whispered through Camp Helen State Park, and phantom pirate ships haunting the Gulf's fog-shrouded horizon. But by night, during spring break, that idyllic facade fell away. Club La Vela, once the world's largest nightclub, pulsed with energy, music, and excess. Thousands of college kids poured in. MTV cameras sparkled, and stars like Kenny Chesney and Luke Bryan grew their fan bases under the neon glare. Yet, that era was at a crossroads. Authorities were beginning to push back, trying to tame the chaos. By 2016, alcohol was banned on sandy beaches in March. Bar curfews were enforced, and reels of MTV-style mayhem began to fade, as families were invited back and party culture was gradually phased out. Within those few wild days of March 2014, When kids packed into rented beach houses with vision boards for their futures, Panama City Beach felt like the world. It made promises of freedom, escape, and transformation. It's precisely into that world that 21-year-old Reny Jose disappeared. A place of paradise and peril. Reny Jose was more than just a name in the headlines. He was a son, a brother, and a young man whose story began long before that spring break trip to Florida. His parents, Shirley and Jose George, came to the United States from India in 1986, just a year after they were married. They settled in Albany, New York, following in the footsteps of many of Jose's 9 siblings who had already built their lives here. It was a leap of faith, but they knew they had a support system waiting. Now, an interesting fact. The family's last name, Jose, comes from a tradition in India where a wife takes her husband's first name as her surname. So, while his father's name was Jose George, the family would carry Jose as their last name. A small but meaningful marker of their cultural roots. On July 24th, 1990, their daughter Reshma was born. And 2 years later, on May 21st, 1992, they welcomed their son, Renyman, though everyone called him Reny. The family made their home in Latham, a quiet suburb outside Albany, where Reny and Reshma grew up. The siblings couldn't have been more different. Reshma was shy and reserved, the kind of child who stayed in the background. Reny was her opposite, an extrovert with a big personality. He loved being the center of attention, and nothing made him happier than making people laugh. He was the goofy one, the life of the party, the kid who would light up a room just by walking into it. Beneath the jokes and the easy smile, Reny was also deeply curious. From a young age, he had a knack for taking things apart to see how they worked, and then putting them back together again. It seemed inevitable that he'd end up in engineering. By the fall of 2010, Reny was headed to Rice University in Houston, Texas, where he began his studies in mechanical engineering. His family proudly moved him into his dorm room, watching their son step into the next chapter of his life. Now, Reny had always been smart, but at Rice, he proved himself exceptional. He maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA and was set to graduate in May 2014, just months after his disappearance. And Reny wasn't only about academics. He thrived in group settings, hanging out with friends, joining engineering competitions, and diving into project-based classes. He loved playing pickup volleyball games and spending time with his family. He had already begun preparing for life after college, buying suits, polishing his resume, and talking excitedly about job prospects. His graduation was going to be a moment of pride not only for him, but for his entire family, who planned to travel from New York to Texas to celebrate. Of course, like most college students, Reny had another side to him. The social life, the late nights, the partying. Friends from Rice described him as someone who enjoyed drinking, and some said he experimented heavily with drugs, especially psychedelics. One friend, speaking years later on the Thin Air podcast, recalled that Reny had probably done more drugs than anyone she knew. He had tried LSD, mushrooms, and, in her words, every drug you could think of. But she also emphasized he was always responsible when it came to his schoolwork. He never let partying get in the way of his goals. She also stressed something important, that she never believed Reny was depressed or suicidal. He may have had his struggles, but she remembered him as smart, motivated, and full of life. And to those who loved him most, his parents, Shirley and Jose, his sister Reshma, Reny was a happy, ambitious young man with a bright future ahead of him. He was a go-getter, a dreamer, and someone who had worked tirelessly to reach the finish line of his college career. But then, just before graduation, everything changed. On March 1st, 2014, Reny picked up the phone and called his mom. His voice was upbeat, casual, the way you'd expect from a college student looking forward to spring break. He said he was going to Panama City with 22 other kids, just for a spring vacation. It was a trip thousands of students make every year, and Reny promised it would be just a week of fun before graduation. Shirley only recognized one name in the group, someone they had met when they first dropped Reny off at Rice University years earlier. That young man is now in dental school. On the way to Florida, Reny sent his mom photos from the car, quick snapshots of the drive, the road stretched out before them, and his friends packed in beside him. When they arrived, he sent her more pictures, shots of the backyard, of the pool glimmering behind the house, and the water just beyond. It was beautiful, but he joked about how cold the weather was for Florida in March. The group rented what could only be described as a mansion, a sprawling 2-story beach house with 10 bedrooms and 8.5 bathrooms, and a pool big enough to rival a resort. The back deck opened directly onto the white sand of Panama City Beach. The Gulf of Mexico just steps away. Traveling there and arriving, everything seemed fine. Reny checked in with his mom, he sent pictures. There was no indication that anything was wrong. But on the evening of March 3rd, just after 7 p.m., Reny's friends claimed something changed. Now, they later told investigators that Reny had taken LSD and that he had been saying strange things, talking about wanting to run away or hurt himself. And to his family, this just didn't make sense. They had never known Reny to use drugs, and he had never shown any signs of depression, anxiety, or mental illness. To them, it felt like a story that didn't add up. The next morning, March 4th, some of Reny's clothing, his pajama pants and socks, were found draped over a railing outside the house. The beach cleaning crew had already been through the area by 6 a.m., so the clothing had to have been placed there sometime after 6. By 11:30 a.m., when Reny hadn't returned and no one could find him, his friends finally contacted police to report him missing. And then, shockingly, almost immediately, 16 of the 22 students packed up their things, cleaned the house, and left Panama City early. They didn't wait for the police. They didn't wait for Reny's family. They just left. Now, that same day, investigators searching the property made a disturbing discovery. Reny's clothing, his wallet, and his cell phone were found stuffed into a trash can outside the rental house. Friends identified those as the clothes he was last seen wearing. Investigators even claimed his glasses were among the items. But when they went to show them to the family later, the glasses were mysteriously missing. And Reny needed those glasses to see. He never would have thrown them away. So 6 of the students stayed behind, 2 of Reny's roommates and 4 young women. But when Reny's frantic parents begged them to explain what happened, they were met with silence. 2 of the women refused to talk at all, instead leaving to buy coffee at Starbucks. The others gave conflicting stories. One said Reny went for a walk. Another claimed they were asleep. They didn't see anything. Someone else said they didn't see him at all, while yet another insisted they'd been out themselves. None of it really lined up. On March 5th, Reny's parents arrived in Panama City Beach desperate for answers, and they went straight to the sheriff's office. But instead of clarity, they were told Reny was in the water. At first, officials said his body would surface in 24 hours, then 48, then maybe weeks or months. Eventually, one officer even suggested, without evidence, that maybe a shark had eaten him. The Bay County Sheriff's Office insisted they threw everything they had into the search. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission and the Coast Guard joined the effort. Helicopters scanned the coastline, boats combed the Gulf. Deputies searched on the ground. They interviewed beachgoers, neighbors, anyone who might have seen something. But there was no trace of Reny. Captain Jason Daffin of the Bay County Sheriff's Office defended the scale of the search, later telling reporters, "You're looking at an entire division plus a few." And I know this investigation went on for weeks, working 8-hour days, 5 days a week. Putting those kinds of resources into it, it was not a lack of manpower. Still, the family could not shake the feeling that the truth lay with the group of friends Reny had come with. Their stories contradicted each other. More than half of them had fled the state within hours of reporting him missing. Shirley later said, "One person is saying he went this way, one person is saying he went that way. It doesn't make sense to us. Just tell the truth. Whatever happened has happened. Just give us something to move on." Investigators, however, maintained there was no sign of foul play. Students who had returned to Rice University were later interviewed, some by Rice campus police, and that the accounts were consistent. To them, the evidence suggested Reny had walked into the Gulf and drowned. But his family never believed that. Weeks passed with no answers. By the third week, Shirley and Jose offered a $15,000 reward for information leading to their son. But it led them nowhere. In August, human remains were found nearby, raising their hopes for closure. But DNA testing revealed they belonged not to Reny, but to another missing man, Michael Lane, who had vanished in 2010. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Nearly 3 years after Reny vanished, his family, working with the nonprofit Lost and Missing, put up a billboard pleading for new leads. They were not going to give up on finding their son. In 2020, Shirley took a bold step. Frustrated with the silence, she publicly named and posted photos of every student who had been in Panama City with her son, sharing them on Facebook in hopes of pressuring someone to speak. Still, no one came forward. Now, despite the dead ends, Bay County Sheriff's Office insists the case remains open. They continue to test unidentified remains, follow up on tips, and keep Reny's file active. But to this day, no definitive answers have surfaced. And every year, Reny's parents return to Panama City Beach, walking the same stretch of sand where their son vanished, hoping for something, anything, that might bring them closer to the truth. When someone vanishes without a trace, theories start to grow in the silence they leave behind. And in the days and weeks after Reny Jose disappeared, speculation spread quickly. Online, in the media, and among those desperate to understand what had happened. One of the earliest and loudest suspicions fell on the very people who were with him that night, his friends. To many, their stories simply didn't add up. For one, the weather on March 3rd was cold, windy, and rainy. Locals remembered it wasn't the kind of night anyone would have willingly walked down to the water. And yet, that's exactly what Reny's friends suggested he had done. Wandered off, maybe even into the ocean, never to return. But why would he? He wasn't wearing swim clothes, and more importantly, nearly all of his belongings, clothing, phone, even his glasses, were later discovered in a trash can outside the rental house. Who would throw their glasses away? He needed them to see. This detail isn't just suspicious. I think it's pretty damning. Then there was the issue of drugs. Some of Reny's friends told police that he had taken LSD that night, and that under the influence, he began talking about wanting to hurt himself. Now, this account conflicted with everything his family knew about him. Reny had never shown signs of mental illness, depression, or suicidal thoughts. And even if he had experimented with drugs in college, as many do, those who knew psychedelics argued that LSD makes people hypersensitive. Why would anyone, while tripping, willingly plunge into the freezing Gulf of Mexico in the middle of the night? What unsettled the family most, though, wasn't just the story his friends told. It was what they didn't tell. Now, as soon as Reny was reported missing, 16 of the 22 students packed their things, cleaned the house, and fled Panama City. They didn't stay to help search. They didn't stand with the family. They simply left. I don't know anyone that would leave while their friend is still missing. And in the months and years that followed, not a single one of them publicly spoke about the case. At the 1-month anniversary of Reny's disappearance, Shirley and Jose voiced their heartbreak. not just over losing their son, but over the silence of those he had trusted. Shirley said many of his closest friends never called, never offered condolences, never even acknowledged what had happened. Some had already hired lawyers by the time she tried reaching out, and her own attorney eventually told her to stop contacting them, warning that she could be accused of harassment. But Shirley never gave up. She managed to speak with 4 of the students directly. From the way they spoke, their hesitation, their guardedness, she became convinced that they knew something about what happened to her son. She believed they were hiding the truth. As speculation grew online, new theories took root. Some questioned whether Reny had even made it to Panama City at all. Could his friends have disposed of his belongings to stage a disappearance? Others pointed to their behavior in the aftermath, avoiding the family, refusing to help, even ignoring the anniversary of his disappearance, as proof that something darker had happened. One moment, in particular, has haunted Shirley. 22 months after her son went missing, she tried again to call each of the students. Only one girl answered, the very one who had first discovered Reny's clothes outside. But when she realized it was Reny's mother on the line, she immediately hung up. Now to Shirley, that spoke volumes. Why would anyone hang up on the mother of a missing friend? To Reny's parents, these weren't the actions of kids who were innocent. And whether or not they were directly involved, their silence felt like complicity. Police, however, have leaned toward different explanations. Their official theories have included suicide, accidental drowning while on drugs, or the possibility that Reny voluntarily vanished, that he walked away from his life and chose not to be found. But Shirley dismissed that last idea entirely. She knew Reny was excited about graduation, about his future career, about celebrating with his family. He wasn't running from anything. He was running towards something. And so the theories continue, unresolved. Did Reny walk into the Gulf that night? Or did something happen inside that beach house that none of his friends are willing to admit? Was this the tragic accident police have described? Or has the truth been buried under silence all along? Spring break in Panama City Beach is a kind of rite of passage. Every year, waves of students flood into the small Florida beach town, chasing sun, freedom, and a week away from reality. On the surface, it looks like paradise. White sand stretching for miles, emerald water glinting in the sunlight, tiki bars strung with neon, and music that doesn't stop till dawn. But beneath the postcard-perfect image, Panama City Beach has always had another reputation. A spring break mecca where the sheer number of people, the endless flow of alcohol, and the feverish energy of youth creates a mix that's both intoxicating and dangerous. In March 2014, when Reny Jose arrived with his friends from college, Panama City Beach was at its peak spring break chaos. The small town itself only has about 12,000 full-time residents. But during spring break, it swells to over 250,000 visitors. Now imagine a town suddenly multiplying its population 20 times over. Every hotel booked, every rental house crammed with students, every beach packed shoulder to shoulder with strangers. And when that happens, the atmosphere changes. Things that normally feel safe, walking home, drifting away from your friends, even stepping outside to get some air, can suddenly feel different. The crowd swallows you. The noise drowns out your voice. And if something goes wrong, you can disappear into the blur without anyone noticing. The numbers back it up. In the years around Reny's disappearance, local law enforcement saw crime skyrocket during spring break. In 2014, the Bay County Sheriff's Office made 324 arrests during March. Just 1 year later, in 2015, that number nearly tripled to 928 arrests. Panama City Beach police reported similar jumps, 772 arrests in 2014, leaping to 935 in 2015. And it wasn't just petty crime. Police were seizing dozens of guns, breaking up violent fights, and responding to stabbings, shootings, and drug overdoses. One weekend in 2015 alone saw 161 arrests and 75 guns confiscated. Even drinking on the beach, something most students thought of as harmless, led to hundreds of arrests. The atmosphere wasn't just rowdy, it was dangerous. And yet, if you were 21 years old, standing on the sand with your friends, it probably didn't feel that way. You're young, you're invincible, you're here to have the time of your life. Maybe you're careful like Reny was. Maybe you don't drink as much. Maybe you mostly stay to yourself. But when you're surrounded by thousands of people, your safety isn't just about your own choices. It's about the chaos around you. So, what can we learn from Panama City Beach? From the very environment where Reny was last seen? Well, first, stick with your people. It sounds obvious, but in the madness of spring break, groups get separated in an instant. One friend goes to the bathroom, another goes to get a drink, someone wants to check out a different party, and suddenly, the safety net you thought you had is gone. Set rules before you go out. Have a buddy system. Never let anyone walk off alone, no matter how confident they seem. Second, make a plan before the chaos starts. Agree on a meeting point if you get separated. Share your addresses. Memorize the number of your hotel or rental. Don't just rely on your phone, because in a crowd of 200,000 people, service can drop, batteries die, phones get lost. And in an emergency, seconds matter. Third, be careful with substances. Panama City Beach is infamous for its party culture. Alcohol flows freely, drugs circulate, and people push limits they might never touch back home. But judgments get cloudy, boundaries blur. Reny's friends said he took LSD before he vanished. And whether or not that's true, the reality is that substances change the way you interact with your environment. They can turn the ocean into a danger zone, make strangers feel trustworthy when they're not, and push someone toward decisions they would never make sober. Fourth, pay attention to the water. The Gulf looks calm, but Panama City Beach is notorious for rip currents, powerful, invisible channels that pull swimmers far from shore. In fact, Bay County has ranked among the deadliest counties for drownings in Florida. It doesn't matter how strong you are or how good of a swimmer you think you are. If you get caught in one, it can overwhelm you in seconds. And finally, always have a backup plan. Keep emergency contacts written down, carry a little cash, save the local police number in your phone, and make sure someone outside of your group knows where you are. So if you don't check in, they'll notice. Because here's the truth. Spring break in Panama City Beach can be unforgettable. It can be the trip of a lifetime, filled with laughter and memories. But for some, it's unforgettable for the wrong reasons. It's easy to lose yourself in the crowd. It's easy to trust the wrong person or wander into the wrong situation. And that's why Reny's case is so haunting. He wasn't just another tourist, another partier. He was a bright young man with his whole future ahead of him. But in the chaos of spring break, in the noise and the crowds and the overwhelming tide of people, he vanished. And that's the lesson here. Panama City Beach promises freedom, but it also demands awareness. Because one small decision, stepping outside alone, taking that extra drink, walking into the dark instead of back into the light, can be the difference between making it home safe or becoming part of the mystery yourself. Reny Jose's story is one of those that lingers long after the headlines fade. He was just 21 years old, standing at the edge of adulthood with so much promise ahead of him. A mechanical engineering student with a brilliant mind, a son who called his parents every day, a young man whose family says he was filled with dreams and plans for the future. Reny was 5'10", 185 pounds, with short black hair and dark brown eyes. He was Indian American and, by all accounts, proud of his heritage and devoted to his loved ones. On March 3, 2014, he was last seen leaving the beach house on Front Beach Road in Panama City Beach, a house he had rented with more than 20 friends for spring break. It was around 7 p.m. on a Monday evening when he walked into the night and simply never came back. Since that moment, there's been nothing. No confirmed sightings, no phone calls, no trace of where Reny went or what happened to him. Just silence and questions that his family has carried for over a decade. Somewhere, someone knows something. It could be a memory that seemed unimportant at the time, a detail you overheard, a fragment of a conversation, even the smallest clue that could help bring this family the answers they've been searching for. And if you're one of those students who went to Panama City Beach with Reny in March of 2014, now is the time to speak up. Now is the time to contact his family. Now is the time to tell them what you know. If you have any information about the disappearance of Reny Jose, please contact the Bay County Sheriff's Office at 850-747-4700. And if you'd prefer to remain anonymous, you can call Crime Stoppers at 850-785-8477. For Reny's parents, Shirley and Jose, every day is lived in the shadow of unanswered questions. They deserve to know the truth. They deserve to bring their son home. And if you hold the missing piece, it's time to come forward. And finally, remember to leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars if you like the show. Or hell, even if you don't. But either way, feel free to let me know what you think. Please follow The Last Trip on Instagram at The Last Trip Crime Pod and subscribe on Patreon to support the show. You'll get extra research, videos, photos, and updates, and even learn more about my personal travels. That's patreon.com/thelasttrippodcast. I'm Jamie Beebe, bringing you your last trip and signing off until the next one. Thanks for listening.